person who's just learning about network science, how would they look at it?
You being in the center and your followers and other people around it, and that is your social network.
There needs to be some kind of curation of who's in your community. How does one go about doing this?
You want people who are not interested in their own success, but who realize that if the businesses who I'm helping, if they are successful, I'm successful. So that.
Hey everyone, and today we have with us Katerina, who is the co-founder of TogetherCrew and has a very interesting background in terms of understanding people, behavior, how communities organize, and what is called network science. So it's one step going away from the vibes and getting into something that's hard, that has some kind of scientific basis behind it. And we'll hear all about this from Katerina. Thank you for being here with us. But first, let's start with your background. You've done some interesting research. You've been a behavioral, scientist, and you've done a bunch of projects before starting Together Crew. So, what's your background like?
Yeah, thank you, Perrine, for having me. So when I think about network science, and I just remember that like half a year ago, I think it goes back to a book I read as a teenager about another teenager who was kind of not happy anymore in school. All the friends changed, when you go from primary to secondary school. And then the teacher did an exercise to figure out the community in the classroom, and that kind of blew up. Point is, the exercise was a social network map that the teacher did of that class. And of course, at that age, I forgot about it, never thought about it again. And then when I was doing my master thesis, I had to pick a topic. And I was really interested in people sharing information, and why do some people talk with each other and other people not? And why do you tell one person, you will tell them like a secret information, and another person you will never tell them the secret, and what is behind this? And I read this paper. I was like, yeah, this is a cool method. Let's just do this. And I had no idea about what network science is, and just really nothing, and just jumped right into it. And throughout my master thesis, I realized that nobody in my department actually knew what I was doing. I needed a completely different program. The stats department couldn't help me. So it was just me and the internet. So me and the whole community online trying help me out and running the stats and stuff like that. And then the master thesis turned into a PhD, which was still about multidisciplinary teams. How do we get people to actually coordinate with each other and trying to get them to do stuff? And doing it in a way that everybody feels good about it. That's kind of the main point. And yeah, so I just kept on doing the research part on then digging deeper into the network science. I led several research groups, like international research groups, that looked at network science for learning, because when you're learning, you have to share information. You can learn from a book, but you can learn better from people. So it's kind of, network science has become what I breathe. It's just, for me, I cannot think about how can a human being achieve something without interacting with another person. It's everything that we do is through the interaction of it, because human beings are not living in a vacuum. We're constantly reading and talking. And when I tell you something, I influence you. And I think that's the core of network science. It's all the decisions a person is doing, all the things that a person is able to achieve or not achieve, all your failures and successes are because of with whom you interacted or with whom you decide not to interact.
So you're not just looking at this from a societal perspective, but from an individual's perspective also. This is something that probably everyone should pay attention to in order to improve their lives in some way. If let's say a person who's just learning about network science, how would they look at it? Maybe in context with what digital social networks are, or in context with how communities organize offline. How should they look at network science?
So the easiest thing is to think about social media, because and in social or whatever social network or social media network you're on it, you get your account, your number of followers, and the people you're following and the people who are following you. And that is what we call your ego network. So this is you being in the center and your followers, like, and other people around it. And that is your social network. If you really want to get deeper into it, you're actually every day you write down with who you interact, and you're creating this map. Like, network science, especially at the very beginning, is about becoming aware of the interactions that are happening around you. And of course, you could also, there are courses and you can go really deep, really quickly into all the metrics that we have. But I think that is distracting from the actual philosophies or ideas that are behind it. And network science is just a method. So you can apply it to study historical context. You can apply it to study like coordination between human beings, innovations, learning. It is used to analyze Wikipedia articles. And of course, if you look about health, like COVID-19, that's like network science is right there. All the network scientists got excited because finally there's a virus and everybody gets it, that we are in constant conversation and constant interaction with each other.
That's really amazing. I think we're just starting to explore this as human beings, and I think it's going to take us to a much more balanced world in some way. There's a great larger cause at the center of this science, which is really amazing. Loneliness epidemic has become a big thing now, and a lot is to be attributed to how we broke the family and the whole village apart. And now we are these digital nomads, but we don't know how to grow our own personal networks. One of the things that we talked about earlier, there needs to be some kind of curation of who's in your community in some way, and this maybe eventually also flows into what you're doing at TogetherCrew. But essentially, you mentioned that it's important, and also you explained the network science map. If I am the ego and I have people surrounding me, I'm the sum total of 5 people around me. So how does one go about uh, doing this as a community leader or as an individual also?
So creating your own network, I say, like, first there's this human, or maybe it's just a Western tendency to think that you can do it all alone. I was like, newsflash, no, you can't. You need other people. And so it's getting over the hesitation or the fear of reaching out and asking for help. That's one thing. And then I think curation takes time. So you can't rush it, and you need to find people who are willing to listen and to connect other people. When you think about a network, it normally has other clusters in it or other subgroups. So you can think about it like a city, and a city with different neighborhoods. And you don't want the neighborhoods to be ghettos. You want them to have some way to connect from one neighborhood to another. And like physically, this would be a street or a park or a bridge. And in a human social network, it's normally a person who's able to identify with two different neighborhoods or two different clusters. And by identifying with these two clusters, you are able to speak the languages from these two areas. And that is important for curation. And for curation, I think you don't want somebody who's super influential. You don't want the super extrovert person, because they are getting all the attention. You want the person who's a bit more quieter at the side, observing, because you can't have a bridge, or in order for information or ideas or products or just whatever, goods, services to flow from one neighborhood to another neighborhood, you need to know what works in both neighborhoods. You need to make these connections. And I think the very extroverts ones, they're kind of at the center of the different neighborhoods. They have a different function in a network, and they are not the best one if you want to create. So for my community, if I want to have more curators, I would really look at people who don't mind to be quiet, and who are also traveling around physically or digitally in different communities and who show an interest in other people.
Got it. I have to unpack this. This is such great insights. I think two things that you said that really struck my mind is, one is that the power or influence, not maybe power, but influence or even communication should not be focused around one individual. So, which means if we were to look at it as a network, as a social network or as a computer network, what you're saying is there should not be too much centralization of influence in some way. And that doesn't make it a great sustainable community. Whereas generally, I think today what community builders are looking for is that one star, and they think that then everything's going to drive towards them because they have maybe a lot of Twitter followers or they are influential in some space. But what you're saying is that actually a sustainable community would be where the influence is sort of narrow in range, not very polarized in range.
Yes, I was just looking up for the name of somebody because there's a great article on network beefing, so how to create a community, and the guy he explained that if you have a business community and this is kind of nothing is really working, let's say all the business or startups are now kind of dying out, now nobody is successful. In order to turn this around, you want somebody who is talking with the two different startups, kind of with two startups and kind of connecting them. So you want, I call them bridge builders. You want people who are not interested in their own success, but who realize that if the businesses who I'm helping, if they're successful, I'm successful. So that's kind of this second order, second degree of achievement. And the very central people in any community, they have a different function. They are normally the people in a network, or from a social science perspective, the ones in the center are the ones who are deciding what behavior is okay or not okay. So they're kind of like the status quo. But if you want to change something in the community, you need the bridge builder who brings something from one community to another and then slowly infiltrates it. And then once the most influential person is doing this, then this new behavior becomes the status quo.
Got it. So sort of having a genetic pool diversity, this is cultural pool diversity in some way that's needed.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's interesting. And second thing that you said is you don't want people who don't identify with that particular community, which means there is need for some kind of diversity, but not too much polarity. If neighborhoods are starkly divided and not very well connected in a particular city, as you frame it, that means that there is some kind of polarization possible, and is that not desirable, or is that too much on the extreme end of diversity?
Good point. I think you always have some polarization. The key is to have a balance in it. If you take a whole city, at least in Europe, the city center is often very multicultural. That's kind of where everything meets. And then the further out you go, the more homogeneous it gets. And that's because it's harder to go from the center to the edges. So it takes just more time. And that's when people travel in the physical world. But I think it's the same in digital community. So every Web3 community, every Telegram group or Discord community, we see it as one siloed digital container, but they're actually overlapping. Like we are in one Telegram group, but you are in a different Telegram group, and I'm in a different one. So through this, the information goes out, but the more jumps information has to do, so the more people or groups and information passes through, the weaker the signal gets. Like, I don't know if you ever played telephone as a kid, when you have a row of kids and somebody whispers something and then at the end you get budget.
Yeah.
That's the same between communities. Like that's how fear spreads. And anyway, so that's where the diversity and the polarity comes in. So you have some diverse ones, and then you have the very homogeneous and homogeneous one at the edges.
Wow. So I think we can keep talking about this. I have questions that will last for maybe 3 hours. But it's important that we understand that now with all of this knowledge that you have, what's the product that you're creating, what's the vision, and who uses this, and then maybe I can get into some specific questions that I've found very interesting points on your website as well.
Yeah. So maybe as a backstory, like I teach data-driven decision making, and I see people struggling with data at the same, or struggling how to use and when to use data. And at the same time, I'm convinced that if you have the right metrics, you can design better actions. So then you reach your goal quicker. So that's one thing. I tried before to have a company or a startup where we take academic knowledge and put it out for other ones and make it usable, and kind of take whatever science is producing and taking it out of the ivory tower and make it accessible to everybody. But that didn't work. And then with TogetherCrew, what happened is that I joined a DAO. So I joined an online community, and then I directly clicked with my co-founder who was experiencing these problems about how can I measure the health of my community? Or he was talking also with other ones, and everybody was having the same problem where they were like, well, all the tools that we're having, they tell me how many active members are in my community. But people join these communities to form connections. It's not to have like a pin board where you put your messages or your articles out. People want to learn from each other and find business partners in different communities. So he was looking for a way to measure the relationships that exist within the community, because he knew that if there are relationships in the community, it's a strong community, it will last longer. I was like, well, network science is actually is really just measuring this. So that's how TogetherCrew started it. And we have been building now for a bit more than a year. And a couple of months ago, we realized nobody cares about metrics. It's all like, it's a fancy dashboard, and the data scientists in our teams, we really want to kind of just boom, make it more, have 1,000 more metrics, and you could do cool things, like rearrange them different ways. And like, I was thinking, well, a community manager could come in and ask their research question, and then we give them the metrics, stuff like that. But not everybody is a researcher or data scientist. So what we're doing right now is we're hiding the wonderful numbers, and we're building automations based on top of that, because that's actually what community managers want. Like we talked with a lot of them, and like so many times I hear like, oh, building my community, it's so much work. You're always answering questions and the same questions over and over again. There's a person in who's disrupting everything, who's not following the rules, and it's hard to focus. And then sometimes you have business leaders without clear strategies, and so on and so on. So we realized community managers don't want numbers, they want actions, and we're using the numbers to decide what actions should be taken. So currently we're testing out something where disengaged members, they get a little message saying, hey, I haven't seen you around, why don't you check out this and this channel? And in this way it is automatic, so the community manager has to do nothing, and it helps the community member to realize, oh yeah, I was part of this community and life just happened, and then you forget the digital communities you're part of. So that's what we're doing right now. And then we see what other automations will add to that. Currently it's retention, onboarding will most probably also become part of it. We have a customer support bot using LLMs, and we're most probably going to start also looking at conversion tracking, because that's something from the business side that's very important. Yes, you want the good relationships, but businesses need to make money.
Got it. That sounds like a great founder's journey, how reality hits and you realize that the customer is not smart enough to understand what you're talking about, which is amazing, because that also shows that you are so early, right? Someday they will want all the complex metrics, but maybe not today, at least not in Web3, it seems like that. So
yeah, like I have seen a similar process in HR. So I worked I work with HR professionals, and they're going through the same things of data being siloed in different tools, always having a small budget. So HR is just considered support, community is just considered support. both units are dealing with people and building relationship, and in both, like HR people and community people, for me they are people. They love talking with people, but they also know I need data, but I don't really want to deal with the data. They want to just get the results. Like, what do I have to do once I have the data? So once I saw the similarities between HR and community, I was like, yeah, it does make sense. And then the data scientist and researcher in me is of course that, but yeah, that's life.
But I think still the number of community managers that I talk to who don't know what they should track, apart from, yeah, I have these many people in my Discord, and there is some very rudimentary basic metrics that all platforms generally give. But apart from that, there is hardly anyone who understands what really they should be tracking. And I can believe that people don't want 1,000 metrics, but without top three, I don't think we go anywhere. There is no progress to be made. So from your perspective, I think apart from all the amazing things that you built, it's important to start with, what, as a Web3 community manager, what metrics should I be tracking, and what are the numbers that are super important in that sense, from a community standpoint, health standpoint?
Yeah, before I answer that, I would like to make the point that community managers, if they have a level above them, not knowing what to track, it's often the results of the community, of the leader not knowing what the purpose of the community is. So, and this gets worse if the community manager is a junior person and then doesn't have the skill to go to the boss and say, I can do whatever I want, but I need a strategy. Like, you need to give me a North Star. So that's it gets worse if the relationship there isn't good. Key metrics for a Web3 project. So last week, there was a conversation in a DAO. I'm just kind of lurking in because I like the project. And it exploded because a person said, this can't be. We are too centralized as one person in 5 different committees. We have to decentralize. So that's one metric Web3 projects specifically can track. Related to the discussion or the example I just gave, you shouldn't decentralize just because it's a principle of Web3. You should consider where you are right now, and can you deal with the coordination costs that arise once you are decentralized, which is the next metric. So you have decentralization, and then you should measure your silos, because you don't want 5 different units or work streams in your DAO or Web3 project that are not communicating with each other. So these are the neighborhoods. So your decentralization metric, your fragmentation metric, which measures the risk of your Web3 projects falling apart and splintering into 5 different groups, and then your startup is dead. And then the final metric I think is interesting to measure is a leadership skill, and that goes back to the bridge building. So who is in a very good, who of your members are in a leadership position skills, and with that I mean like facilitating between people.
Wow, these are super interesting, and I think you brought up quite some interesting points here. One thing that I took away was there's a community leader and a community manager. So if a founder is actually employing someone to manage the project's community or even Discord, that means that there is a leader and there is a manager, which I don't think has been distinguished quite well as yet. And also, coordination costs go high as we decentralize. That's super, I think, overlooked point out there. So let's say these are the metrics that we are looking at. Now, when we go to TogetherCrew, I think the way the product works is you integrate the bot and you start getting listings. You're building automations on top of it. And I think I saw the health score. That sounded pretty interesting. So even if it is not a focus right now, it would be amazing to know what that is, because that's really the meat of it. I think automations are good for showing to finance guys that, hey, we are saving costs. Yeah, but it would be amazing to go into what health score is and how do you determine it, how does it help a
Mm.
community manager?
Yeah, yeah. So right now, if you would deploy the bot and you have a Discord community, we will show you decentralization and fragmentation. When we researched the domain last year, we had a more elaborate analytical dashboard. Well, it wasn't a dashboard at the time, it was a report which included decentralization, fragmentation, small world metric, member activity, and a survey on how do members belong. And all of these different aspects were included in the health score. So to take this all apart, we said your community is healthy if your members feel that they belong in the community and that they identify it. This is a personal perception. You can't measure it using a Discord integration. You actually need to ask survey, like a survey, because you have to get into people's heads. So you have to go into their beliefs. And that was the first part. And then the second part was the behavior, which is how do members interact with it. And I measure decentralization, which is, I think, pretty clear for most people in Web3. So it's the number of people who, it's how many people talk with how many other people. And then fragmentation was the risk of the community falling apart. And then the other score we had was the small world metric, which is, so we're 2 PhDs in our team, and we love it because it says everything. But we realized soon it says everything for us because we know the whole background of the research. So small world is kind of, it takes into account your neighborhoods and the bridges between the neighborhoods, and it just puts it all in a nice little number of how much you look into a small world. And it goes back to research in the 80s where somebody was given a letter and was told, send this to somebody else and it has to reach Boston. And then let's say you were in Kentucky, whatever other state or little city in the US, and you don't know anybody in Boston, but you knew somebody else who might be a business person who's traveling a lot or a family member, something like that. So then you would send it to them, and in this way it kind of jumps. And the small world metric is based on that research that we have these clusters and these bridges. So that was all included in the health metric. But it's not included in our dashboard because we were struggling to make it clear to community manager. And we are working right now on a simplified version of it that takes into account the number of active members and the size of the community. So we kind of want to balance that. In a very small community, you will have the proportion of active members will be higher simply because the community is smaller. So we are taking the basis for the health metric is going to be more straightforward, but we want to take the size into account and kind of the nuances and how to measure health without getting too big and too complex.
Wow, that sounds really amazing. And I saw how the charts look, especially the health indicators out there. So maybe that's not the focus right now, but that sounds extremely interesting to me as a community builder. And I'm sure that maybe in a few years we'll come to a state where everyone realizes how valuable these can be. Till then, what's the most exciting automation feature that you are building or want to build, even that's something that people should look out for in the future?
Yeah, so I have a beef with the traditional Quest platforms that exist. And my problem is that it's like a bucket of quests everybody can do, but they're not fine-tuned. So I'll have to go through everything and see what do I find relevant. And so what I want for communities is that every community member gets a set of quests that are fine-tuned to their current stage in that community. So if you're newly onboarded, you see different things than when you are in the community already for 5 years, that are fine-tuned to their interest and to why they joined the community. So it's like a to-do list, your own personal to-do list for that one community, including what channel to look at, what article to read, who to reach out to. So really, really, really fine tuned activities a community member can do. And in a way, it's like everything that the community manager is currently doing, but now done by AI. So that's my vision for TogetherCrew.
Wow, that's maybe reputation-based movement up and down, sideways in the community. That's what probably you're saying. That now I'm an old member of a community, so I get access to certain channels without me having to do anything or the manager having to do anything. This is fantastic. I won't ask you when this is going to be launched, but I'm just glad that you're working on something like this. This sounds phenomenal, amazing stuff. Any advice or anything that you want to tell community builders, managers?
Pull in your team. So just because you are a community manager doesn't mean that you have to do everything alone. And if, for example, if you are a community manager that is representing like a technical product or a protocol or something like that, you often get questions by community members on how to do something. But as a community manager, you don't have the expertise. So you go into the devs, blah, 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 and it goes on and on and on. And it makes everything long and it makes it frustrating for the community member. In these situations, there should be somebody from the core team that is part of the community. So I think that's the first thing, like pull your team in, and then use is the wrong word, but give opportunities to community members to be active. So simple things like having an AMA where one of the community members is answering questions, or asking what your community members have achieved, and then use that achievement of your community members on your different social media channels to show what people in your community can do. So on these two things, I think community managers could have should do and would be nice for them.
Sounds amazing. I think thanks for doing this. And there is a lot we've just, I think, dipped our toes in the water as of now. There's a lot to be understood, but would love for everyone to follow TogetherCrew, give them a shout out, and check out the product that they've built. So thank you, Katerina, for doing this.
Thank you. And of course, if anybody has questions about the metrics, just DM me. I'm always love to talk about numbers.
That's awesome.